The air in Louisiana is heavy, thick as molasses, and it clings to the skin like a curse. When the sun rises, it paints the cotton fields in a soft golden haze, so pretty a stranger might mistake it for paradise. But I know better. Paradise does not chain men to labor from dawn to dusk. Paradise does not break backs and spill blood so that another man might live fat and proud. My name is Samuel, though on this land, that name carries little weight. To the master, I am no more than a tool, a body to bend under the weight of his fortune. Still, when I whisper my name to myself in the quiet of night, I feel it burn in my chest like a coal that refuses to die. Each morning begins the same. The horn sounds before the sky even softens, before the birds stir in the trees. My body rises because it must, though every muscle aches from yesterday's toil. I take my place among the others, our bare feet trampling the dirt paths that lead to the fields. Cotton stretches before us like a white sea, endless, merciless. The overseer's whip cracks through the air, a reminder sharper than any sermon: bend, pluck, stuff the sack, move faster. Sweat blinds my eyes before the first hour passes. My fingers bleed from the burrs that cling to the cotton, tearing skin as if the plant itself resents my touch. Yet in that same field, beauty mocks me. The morning mist rises from the bayou, lifting slow, curling soft against the cypress trees. The blossoms smell sweet, almost like the honeysuckle my mama used to braid into her hair. Sometimes, I catch myself staring at the sky, the clouds drifting free while my own spirit feels nailed to the earth. And I wonder, why is it that God gives us beauty only to set it beyond reach? The master would never understand such a question. He cares for beauty only when it glitters on his table or lines his pockets. His name is etched into every barn and branded onto every mule as if this whole land were a mirror for his pride. He is a man with too many coats, too many rings, and too many debts of cruelty that he believes will never come due. He walks the rows sometimes, not because he needs to, but because he enjoys the sight of our bent backs. I feel his gaze slide over us like the weight of chains. His boots sink into the dirt that we have watered with sweat and blood, and he calls it his land. His wealth comes from these sacks of cotton, carried on our shoulders until we stagger, yet he preaches to his friends about his cleverness, his vision, his strength. I know him too well. I know the sound of his laughter, loud, sharp, the kind that cuts deeper than any lash. I know the stench of his cigars, the sweet smoke rolling into the air while we choke on dust. To him, we are not people. We are shadows, shaped into men only to serve. And yet inside me, there is a small rebellion that he cannot touch. I keep memories alive when he tries to grind them to dust. I remember my mother's voice, low and steady, singing in the dark when I was a boy. I remember my father's hands, rough from work but warm when they rested on my shoulder. They are both gone now, sold or dead, I'll never know which, but I carry them within me. That memory is mine, and the master can never own it. I also resist in smaller ways. When he orders haste, I move steady. When he demands silence, I hum beneath my breath. When he calls me boy, I whisper man to myself so quiet no one can hear. These are not victories anyone else might notice, but to me, they are proof that Samuel still lives, not just the slave he would have me be. But the master has a gift for reminding us where we stand. One afternoon, the sun was burning hot enough to peel the skin. My sack dragged behind me, heavy as stone, when the master rode in on his horse. His friends were with him, laughing, sipping whiskey from silver flasks. They wanted a show, and he was eager to provide. "Samuel," he called, his voice slicing across the rows. My body stiffened, though I kept my eyes low. He liked it when we pretended not to hear, so he could demand louder. "Samuel!" I stepped forward, dust rising around my feet. He looked me over slow, as though measuring a piece of cattle. "Hold up that sack," he ordered. I lifted it, muscles straining. The weight pulled at my shoulders, but I did not let it drop. His friends chuckled, already entertained. "See here, gentlemen," the master said, pointing with his riding crop. "This one thinks he's strong, but strength in a mule don't make it a man. Watch." Before I could brace, he drove the crop down across my sack. Cotton burst from the slit he'd made, white fluff tumbling into the dirt like snow. His friends roared with laughter. "Pick it up, boy," he sneered. "Every last piece, and don't stop till the ground looks clean enough to eat off." I bent low, gathering the cotton one handful at a time. Dust filled my nose, my back screamed, and the men laughed harder with each scoop I made. In that moment, I felt something cold settle inside me. It was not despair. It was not shame. It was a seed, small, hard, and rooted deep. The master had planted it himself, though he didn't know it. And one day, when that seed grew, it would choke him the way cotton chokes the air when it's pressed too tight. The master's laughter followed me long after that day in the fields, sharper than the sting of the whip. I carried it with me like a stone in my chest. Nights offered little rest, for my back ached and my pride ached worse. I lay on the rough planks of the slave quarters, staring at the cracks in the roof where the stars winked through, and thought of everything I had endured under this man. I thought of the beatings, leather tearing skin until I bled into the dust, the overseer's arm rising and falling like a machine made only for cruelty. I thought of my kin, scattered like leaves in a storm. My mother's song had been sold away with her. My father's hands had vanished into some unknown land. Brothers, sisters, I do not know where they rest or if they still draw breath. The master stole them all, piece by piece, until he thought I was hollow. But I was not hollow. Not yet. Among the others, I saw how his cruelty shaped us all. Some bent low and tried not to breathe too loud, as though silence could make them invisible. Some prayed, whispering hymns that floated up through the night, begging heaven to notice what earth had ignored. Others dreamed of escape, their eyes always turned northward, toward whispers of a river that might lead to freedom. They spoke to me sometimes, voices low, glances sharp to be sure no overseer lingered. "Samuel, you strong," one woman whispered while we shelled corn in the dim light. "If you run, you could make it." Her words stirred something, but not what she meant. I did not want to run. I did not want to vanish into the woods like a shadow. No, what I wanted was heavier, darker. There were others, too, who watched me differently. They said nothing of escape. They admired how I kept my back straight even when beaten, how I answered the master with my silence when he demanded my fear. Their eyes told me they carried hope in me, a hope I did not yet understand. Then came the day when hope broke, and anger replaced it. It was an elder he struck, old Joseph, his beard white, his hands twisted by years of labor. Joseph could not move as fast, and the overseer saw it as defiance. The lash cut into that frail back while the rest of us stood frozen, our fingers clenched into fists we dared not raise. The master watched, smiling. When Joseph fell to his knees, the master barked, "Sell him south. He ain't worth feedin' no more." That night Joseph was gone, his cot empty, his song silenced. We all knew south meant worse than death. Or maybe it was the child little Ruth, no taller than the cotton stalks. She was torn from her mother's arms, sold in the yard like a calf. Her mother's screams echoed through the cabins for nights after, a sound so raw it stripped the air. The master had signed the bill of sale with a flourish, bragging of the profit he'd made. I saw then what I had always known but tried not to face. The master would never stop. His hunger had no bottom. His cruelty had no edge. As long as he lived, we would all be shadows, vanishing one by one into his greed. And so my thoughts turned, not to escape, not to prayer, but to vengeance. The cotton itself gave me the idea. I watched it day after day, the bales packed so tight a man could hardly push a hand through. The white fluff that looked soft and innocent, but when pressed, became suffocating. The same cotton that made the master rich, that dressed his wife and lined his tables, might yet be the thing to smother him. And then there were the coffins. Sometimes carpenters on the plantation built them, pine boxes lined with cloth, for white men who died in comfort. I saw how the boards were nailed, how the lids shut out both air and light. I studied them with the eyes of a man no longer chained only to labor but to an idea. Cotton, coffins, wealth and death, bound together. The master thought cotton his crown, but I would make it his grave. The whispers of rebellion inside me grew louder with each passing day. I found myself walking slower past the barn, tracing the shape of the coffins with my eyes. At night, when the others prayed for deliverance, I prayed for courage not to run, but to strike. One evening, the sky turned red with sunset, and I lay outside on the hard ground, staring up at the stars. Their light shimmered like fireflies, ancient and eternal, untouched by whips or chains. I thought of Joseph's bent back, of Ruth's tiny hands reaching for a mother she would never see again, of my own mother's voice stolen from me. Something in me hardened then, as if the stars themselves bore witness to my vow. I whispered it aloud, low enough that only the night could hear. If freedom won't come for me, then justice will come for him. The barn was where I began to shape my vengeance into something solid. By day, it was a place of ordinary labor, cotton bales stacked high, tools scattered, the smell of wood and dust thick in the air. By night, when the overseer's boots no longer echoed and the quarters had gone quiet, it became my sanctuary. My mind worked faster than my hands, turning hate into design. Cotton was my prison, but it would also be my weapon. I had known its softness when it brushed against my skin, but I also knew its cruelty when pressed tight. Cotton bales smothered like dirt. Once a man was buried under enough of it, there was no breath left to steal. I remembered the times I'd fallen into a pile, how the weight crushed the chest and forced the lungs to beg. It was like drowning in whiteness, sinking into silence. That memory never left me. And coffins, I studied those too. The carpenters built them with care, simple pine for the poor, polished oak for the wealthy. Each one was a box that stole the air, a final chamber where the living turned to dust. I watched how the nails sealed the lids, how the hammer's blow shut out the world forever. Death was not just in the ground, it was in the very shape of those boxes. One evening, I lingered longer than I should have, sweeping the barn after the others left. My hands brushed over the wood, testing its weight. The thought came clear as sunrise, a coffin of cotton. A grave the master would never expect, a burial made from the very thing that fattened his pockets. The plan lodged in me, fierce and unshakable. Still, my hands trembled when I first began. I asked myself if it was sin, if vengeance made me no better than him. The good book preached forgiveness, but what forgiveness had he shown? He had stolen families, broken bodies, sold children, and laughed at our cries. If justice would not come from heaven, then perhaps it was meant to rise from my own two hands. Night after night, I worked. I disguised it as labor, stacking boards, moving nails, sweeping dust. When the overseer asked why I lingered, I told him I was tidying the barn for the next day. He never looked too close. He trusted my silence as obedience. But in that silence, I was building. The coffin grew slowly, piece by piece. I lined the bottom with cotton, not soft and loose, but packed hard, heavy enough to press the breath from any man who lay upon it. I hammered the boards steady, the sound echoing in my chest like a heartbeat. Each strike of the nail felt like a promise kept to those who had suffered before me. Some nights, doubt crept in. I saw Joseph's weary eyes, Ruth's small hands, my mother's vanished smile. I asked myself if vengeance would bring them back. It would not, but it might honor them. It might whisper to their spirits that Samuel had not bowed, that Samuel had fought back. The hardest part was not the building, but the waiting. I needed the master alone, with no overseer, no friends, no eyes to spoil my work. That chance came in the form of his paranoia. He had been losing small amounts of cotton, stolen, no doubt, by traders or slaves brave enough to risk the lash. Each bale was money, and he was obsessed with money. I let slip, careful and quiet, that I thought I'd seen movement in the barn at night. Not much, just a shadow, a rustle. The overseer scoffed, but the master's eyes narrowed. He trusted nothing, least of all us. His wealth was guarded closer than his own blood. Days passed, and he asked me again, sharp as a blade. "What did you see in the barn?" I lowered my eyes, let fear coat my words. "Could have been rats, master, could have been a thief. I didn't want to trouble you with it." That was enough. His pride could not allow even the suggestion of theft. He said he would come himself to prove his authority, to catch whoever dared touch what was his. He ordered me to meet him there after sundown, alone. The hours dragged that day. My hands worked in the fields, but my heart pounded like a drum in my chest. Sweat poured down, though the heat was no worse than usual. I kept my head low, speaking to no one, for fear my thoughts would spill from my mouth. By the time the sun slid down and the sky burned orange, my fate was sealed. I slipped into the barn ahead of him, checking the coffin once more. It sat in shadow, lined and waiting, the cotton inside shining pale in the dim light. My palms itched, my breath came ragged. This was no dream. Tonight I would decide not just his end, but my own. The sound of boots on dirt reached my ears. The door creaked open, letting in the last glow of daylight. The master stepped inside, his silhouette tall, his voice booming. "Samuel, where's this thief you spoke of?" I stood in the shadows, heart hammering. The door swung shut behind him, the barn swallowing the light. And with hands steady as stone, I reached for the bolt and slid it across. The bolt slid into place with a sound that felt like thunder in my chest. The master turned sharply, the faint glow of the lantern he carried casting shadows across his face. His eyes narrowed. "What's this, Samuel?" His voice was calm but sharp, a blade hidden in velvet. "Locking me in." "You got something to confess." For the first time, I did not lower my eyes. I stepped out from the shadows. My breath was steady, my body coiled like a spring. "No confession, master," I said. My voice surprised me, firm, unshaken. "Only truth." He barked a laugh, loud and cruel, filling the barn with its echo. "Truth, from you, boy, the only truth you know is that you belong to me." His words cut, but not like before. Tonight they slid off me like rain on stone. "You took everything from me," I said. "My mother, my father, my kin. You fed your wealth on our blood, and you thought it would never come back to you." He scoffed, stepping closer, the lantern light flickering over his rings, his boots, the sweat on his brow. "You think you're a man, Samuel. You're nothing but a shadow that moves when I tell it to, a mule with a voice, and if I wanted, I could have you whipped until your skin peels." I felt my fists clench. "Then do it. Try it now. But tonight you will learn that shadows can swallow the man who casts them." His laugh came again, but there was a crack in it now, a hint of uncertainty. He lifted his riding crop, pointing it at me like a weapon. "Careful, boy. You don't know who you're talking to." "I know exactly who I'm talking to," I said. "I'm talking to a man whose grave is waiting." His eyes flicked to the corner where the coffin sat. He smirked, shaking his head. "You built that. For me, you think you've got the strength." "I don't need strength," I said, stepping closer. "I got justice." He swung the crop, but I caught it midair. The leather stung my palm, but I yanked hard, pulling him off balance. His lantern fell, rolling on the dirt, its light trembling across the barn walls. We struggled, his fists heavy, mine fueled by years of rage. He slammed into me, but I dug my heels into the earth. My shoulder drove into his chest, and he stumbled backward toward the coffin. "Get off me, you black devil!" he spat, clawing at my arms. I shoved harder, the coffin's edge pressing against his legs. He cursed, twisted, but his fine boots slipped on the dirt. With one final push, he toppled backward into the box. For a moment, he stared up at me, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You wouldn't dare," he hissed. "You're mine, you'll always be mine." I leaned over him, my breath ragged. "Not tonight." I grabbed the lid, heavy and rough, and swung it down. His hands shot up, pressing against it, his voice roaring in fury. "No, Samuel, you'll hang for this, you'll burn." The coffin groaned as he thrashed, the cotton inside swallowing his movements. I pressed my weight onto the lid, my arms straining, my teeth clenched. His fists pounded from beneath, a drumbeat of desperation. The hammer lay close, the nails gleaming in the lantern's glow. My hand closed around it, trembling not with fear but with purpose. I set the first nail against the wood, lifted the hammer, and drove it down. Crack. His scream rose, muffled, swallowed by the cotton. Crack. The coffin shook beneath me, but the nail held. Crack. Each strike was a heartbeat, each heartbeat a verdict. My arms ached, but I did not stop. Nail after nail, strike after strike, until the lid no longer moved, until his pounding grew weaker, until his voice turned to hoarse gasps. Inside the box, the cotton closed in on him. I could hear the faint thumps fading, the rasp of breath smothered by the white that had once clothed him, fed him, made him king of this land. Cotton fed him, I whispered through the hammer's rhythm. Cotton clothed him, now cotton will bury him. The last nail sank deep and the barn fell into silence. Only my breath filled the air, harsh, unsteady, alive. I pressed my ear to the wood once, hearing nothing but the soft hush of suffocation, the sound of wealth turning to death. For a long moment I stood still, staring at the coffin. The smell of pine and sweat and dust pressed against me. My hands shook, not with regret, but with the weight of what I had done. The master was no more. The man who thought himself untouchable now lay in a box, drowned by the very thing he worshipped. I set the hammer down, its handle warm from my grip. My heartbeat slowed, steady now, like a drumbeat guiding me forward. I pulled the bolt back from the door, the cool night air rushing in, carrying the smell of damp earth and stars. I stepped out into the darkness, leaving the coffin behind, the barn silent as a tomb. There was no turning back. My fate was sealed, but so was his. Morning broke, as it always did, the horn sounding, the overseer's boots pounding, the cotton fields shimmering white beneath the rising sun. But that day, something was different. The master did not appear. His horse remained in the stable, his voice absent from the air. The land itself seemed to notice. By noon, word spread, the master was gone. Some said he'd fallen ill, taken by a sudden fever in the night. Others whispered he'd been called away to settle debts. The white folks told their tales quickly, desperate to cover the truth. A man like him did not simply vanish, not without questions, not without shame. So they gave him a death fit for their pride, polished with lies. But among us, the truth lived like a fire under ash. We spoke it low, only when shadows stretched long and no overseer lingered. Samuel, they whispered. Samuel did it. In the quarters, eyes lit with something I had never seen before, not just fear, not just sorrow, but a spark of defiance. Mothers hushed their children with stories of a man who had buried cruelty itself. Old men, bent with labor, straightened a little when they said my name. It rolled soft at first, uncertain, then strong, as if each tongue carried it like a hymn. Samuel buried him. Samuel made the cotton his coffin. Samuel struck back. I became more than myself. My story walked faster than my feet ever could, passing from row to row, field to field. They carried it like water, like breath, like hope. Did the whites suspect? Perhaps. Some said the overseer found the barn door unlatched, the coffin nailed shut, the smell of death already seeping from the cracks. Yet no one dared open it. Better to bury it quick, to cover the shame. They told themselves he had died of a weak heart or a sudden sickness. They dug a grave, lowered the box, and prayed with trembling voices. But those who bent their backs in those fields knew better. As for me, where I went, no one can say. Some claimed I fled into the swamps, where no hound could follow, my body swallowed by the cypress and the fog. Others said I ran north, chasing freedom through the secret roads that whispered like veins through the land. And some believe I was caught, lashed until my breath gave out, my body thrown into an unmarked pit. But in truth, my fate mattered less than the story I left behind, for I had become something larger than flesh and blood. I was no longer just Samuel, bound in chains. I was the shadow that reminded them we were not broken. I was the whisper that told them the master's power was not eternal. I was the proof that vengeance could be carved from suffering, sharp as any blade. Even now, When the wind moves through the cotton fields, I like to think my name still rides with it. The same wind that carried my mother's song, the same wind that lifted Joseph's last sigh, the same wind that dried Ruth's mother's tears. It hums through the stalks, bending them low, rustling the white tufts that once weighed on our backs. Some who labor there still bow their heads and murmur, "Samuel," as if calling to a ghost who watches over them. Perhaps I am that ghost now, more spirit than man, more story than flesh. And if so, then I am glad, for stories cannot be whipped. Stories cannot be sold. Stories cannot be chained. They said the master was buried in cotton. They never said by whose hand. But in the wind that runs through those fields, my name still rides. Stories like Samuel's remind us that even in the darkest chains, there was defiance, there was courage, and there was fire. His name may ride the wind, but his voice still speaks through us today. What about you? Do you believe Samuel's act was vengeance or justice long overdue? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters. And if you want more untold stories of resistance, survival, and truth, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so these stories will never be forgotten.